Hello.
An ordinary day in the city park seemed completely mundane to most of its visitors. People were strolling along the paths, mothers were pushing strollers, children were chasing pigeons, and some were walking their dogs. The sun was shining brightly, and only a light breeze added freshness to this hot summer day. But in the very center of this idyll, near an old bench under a wide chestnut tree, sat a man whom most people deliberately ignored. His clothes were worn out, his face was tanned and tired, and his eyes were sad, and at the same time full of some kind of inexplicable warmth. Next to him lay a dog with spotted fur, which from time to time wagged its tail slightly, as if to calm its owner. The man, who was simply called John in the park, came here almost every day. He brought an old backpack with him, in which he kept a few essentials: a piece of cardboard with the words "Help me and my friend," a bottle of water, and some dog treats. People walked by, giving him brief glances, some with pity, some with disdain, but most just tried to ignore him. For them, he was part of the park landscape, like a bench or a lamppost. John and his dog, Max, were inseparable. They had met only a few months ago, but had become a real family. John remembered the day he first saw Max. He was sitting in the same park, hiding from the rain under the same chestnut tree. It was one of the hardest nights of his life. It seemed that the rain, which was pouring down non-stop, was washing away the last vestiges of hope. John was sick, he had a fever, and he felt completely broken. And then, as if out of nowhere, Max appeared. The little dog came up to him, gave him a gentle sniff, and then just lay down next to him, warming him with his body. It was something more than a mere presence. At that moment, John felt that he was no longer alone. Max stayed with him until the morning, and it was this dog who helped him through the worst night of his life. Since then, John and Max have been inseparable. They woke up together, walked around the city together in search of food, and found shelter together for the night. Max was always by his side, always alert, ready to protect his master from even the slightest danger. For John, this dog was more than a friend. He became his meaning of life, his only family. This day in the park began like any other. John sat on his usual bench, holding a cardboard sign. Max lay down next to him, watching the passers-by carefully. Someone threw a few coins into his outstretched hand. Someone pretended not to notice. John was used to it. He didn't complain or grumble. He just tried to live another day. But this day turned out to be completely different from the others. It all started with the roar of a motorcycle that cut through the tranquility of the park. It was not just the sound of an engine. It was the sound of impending aggression. People sitting nearby turned their heads in the direction of the noise. A motorcycle, bright and shiny, drove right into the park alley, disturbing the tranquility of the environment. On it sat a tall, stout man in a leather jacket and dark glasses. His appearance immediately evoked mixed emotions. Some people watched him with curiosity. Others tried to avoid his gaze with anxiety. The man on the motorcycle rode down the alley until he stopped in front of John's bench. Taking off his helmet, he looked at the homeless man and his dog with contempt. "What do we have here?" he said, his voice full of contempt. John, who was used to such situations, tried to ignore him, but Max growled slightly, as if sensing danger. The motorcyclist came closer. His boots pounded loudly on the asphalt, adding to the tension in the air. "Is this your territory? Are you the boss?" he continued to taunt. John remained silent, his head down, but his hand instinctively reached out to Max to calm the dog. Meanwhile, Max stood up and stood between John and the stranger. The dog looked directly at the motorcyclist, showing that he was ready to defend his master. This only seemed to irritate the man. "Oh, look at that defender," he said, leaning closer to the dog. "You think you can scare me?" Max responded with a quiet but determined growl. A crowd began to gather around. People stopped to see what was happening, but no one was in a hurry to intervene. John felt his heart begin to race. He knew this could end badly. "Please leave us alone," he said quietly, but his voice was full of desperation. The motorcyclist just laughed. "Do you even realize where you are? This is no place for people like you." He raised his leg, pretending to hit Max. John screamed, "No, please don't hurt him." But the motorcyclist didn't stop. And just when it seemed that the situation was getting out of hand, something unexpected happened. A calm but firm voice came from the crowd. "That's enough." The voice was not loud, but its tone made everyone around him freeze. John looked up and saw a man walking confidently toward the conflict. At first glance, he looked ordinary: dark jeans, a black t-shirt, and a light jacket. But the way he carried himself indicated that he was not just a bystander. The motorcyclist turned around and looked at the stranger in surprise. "Who are you?" he asked rudely. But the stranger did not answer immediately. He stopped a few meters away and said calmly, "Is this really what you want to do?" His voice sounded so confident that the motorcyclist was momentarily confused. John, not realizing what was happening, just held Max close to him. All he could do was watch as the newcomer changed the course of this tense scene. The motorcyclist remained standing, as if trying to figure out who this stranger was and why he was so confident in interfering. The crowd began to whisper quietly. People were looking closely at the new participant in the scene. Many recognized him, and this fact caused a slight whisper of surprise. The stranger was none other than Keanu Reeves. His calm posture and imperturbable gaze caused even more tension in the atmosphere. "What do you want?" the motorcyclist asked rudely, trying to maintain his advantage. He raised his chin as if to demonstrate his authority. Keanu, however, remained unfazed. He took a few more steps forward, his eyes full of determination. "I'm asking you if you think it's right to bully the weak?" asked Keanu, his voice remaining calm, but with a hidden power. His words made many in the crowd think, and the motorcyclist himself looked confused for a moment. "It's none of your business," he growled again, but his tone no longer had the confidence it had before. "You're just another one of those people who likes to mind their own business. Or maybe you think you're a hero." Keanu paused, assessing the situation. His gaze briefly rested on John and Max, who were sitting on the ground, cuddling up to each other. The dog had stopped growling now, but remained tense, ready for any development. Keanu returned his gaze to the motorcyclist. "Heroism has nothing to do with it," he replied. "But the way you behave says a lot about you. People always show their true colors when they have power over those who cannot defend themselves. And now you are showing who you really are." The crowd was quiet. People watched every movement and every word with curiosity and expectation. The motorcyclist began to get nervous. He felt that the situation was getting out of his control. His anger, which had seemed all-consuming a few minutes ago, was now mixed with doubt. "Do you think you know me?" he suddenly blurted out, raising his voice to cover his own uncertainty. "You don't know anything about me." His fists clenched and his face turned red. Keanu remained calm. His voice was even softer, but it didn't diminish the power of his words. "I may not know you, but I see what you do, and this is what defines you as a human being." At that moment, the motorcyclist thought that everyone around him was looking at him in judgment. Even those who had initially just stood aside were now clearly supporting Keanu. Someone in the crowd said loudly, "Leave them alone." These words were the last straw. The motorcyclist looked around with irritation, glancing at the crowd, then at Keanu, and then at John and Max. He realized that it would be pointless to continue. His anger had turned to defeat, though he didn't want to admit it. "This is all nonsense," he muttered, dropping the bottle he had been holding. Then, without another word, he turned to his motorcycle, put on his helmet, and abruptly rode away, leaving only the sound of the engine behind him. The park alley was once again filled with silence. The crowd dispersed, but many stayed to see what would happen next. Keanu approached John and sat down next to him. His gaze became soft and his voice warm. "Are you okay?" he asked. John just nodded, but his eyes were filled with tears. He hadn't expected anyone to stand up for him, especially not someone he recognized immediately. Max gently moved closer to Keanu, sniffing his hand as if to thank him for his help. "You're an angel," John whispered softly, but Keanu just smiled and shook his head. "I'm just a man," he said, "but you and your friend deserve to be treated better." He took a business card out of his pocket and handed it to John. "Here are the contacts of a clinic that can help your dog if he needs anything. And if you need support, They can also advise you on who to contact. John took the card, his hands shaking a little. Thank you, he said, his voice breaking. I'll never forget this. Keanu smiled again, patted Max's head, and stood up. The people who were still there began to applaud as he slowly walked down the alley, leaving behind a scene that had become a symbol of kindness and humanity. This day, which began as an ordinary day, will now forever remain in the memory of those who witnessed it. After the motorcyclist left, the silence in the park gradually returned. People began to go back to their business, but now there was a change in the air. The event they had witnessed had left a mark on everyone's hearts. John remained sitting on the bench, looking at the card Keanu had left him. Max lay down at his feet again, as if realizing that the danger was over. John reread the text on the card several times, trying to realize that this was not just a dream. The clinic's contact, address, and phone number. A small spark of hope appeared in his heart, which had long since faded. He patted Max's head, whispering, "We'll make it, buddy. Someone is paying attention to us after all." Later that day, John decided to take a chance. He got up from his bench, grabbed his backpack, and headed to the clinic whose address was on the card. It was a small but cozy building, with large windows through which he could see the veterinarians taking good care of their patients. John felt excited. He wasn't used to anyone lending him a helping hand, and he didn't know how to behave. A middle-aged woman with a warm smile met him at the reception desk. "How can I help you?" she asked. John handed her his card, trying to explain that he was here on a recommendation. The woman nodded when she saw the familiar logo and asked how she could help him and his dog. Max was quickly examined. The doctors were amazed at how well he was holding up despite the harsh conditions he was living in. The vet praised John for the way he took care of his friend despite all the difficulties. Max received the necessary vaccinations and treatment, and John was even given dog food so that he would have less to worry about in the near future. After the examination, John told the vet about how he met Max that cold night when the dog literally saved his life. The vet listened attentively, and his eyes showed sincere sympathy. "You really are a great couple," he said. "And you know your dog is not just luck. He's your strength, just as you are to him." John felt his heart lighten. For the first time in a long time, he felt that he was not alone. As he walked back to the park, he noticed that he looked at the world a little differently now. People seemed a little kinder, and the world a little brighter. He held the bag of food for Max and felt grateful for the unexpected turn that had changed their lives. Over the next few days, John and Max went about their daily routine, but now they were often approached by people who recognized them from the incident in the park. Some brought food for Max, others just dropped a few warm words that meant so much to John. He didn't know if he would ever see Keanu again, but his gesture had already changed everything. One day, as John was sitting on his usual bench, a man in a strict suit approached him. He looked official, but his face radiated warmth. "Are you John?" he asked, extending his hand to greet him. John nodded, a little surprised. The man continued, "I'm here on a recommendation. I was told that you were the man Keanu Reeves helped. He asked me to give you this." The man took out several documents from the folder. These were vouchers for temporary housing and an offer to participate in a program to support the homeless. John could not believe his eyes. He accepted the documents with trembling hands, and the man explained that this was just the beginning, and if John wanted, he could get even more help. This day was yet another proof that even a small act of kindness can be the beginning of big changes. John looked at Max and said, "Well, my friend, it looks like we have a new beginning ahead of us." Max, as always, responded with a light wag of his tail, as if to confirm his master's words. A few days passed after John received his vouchers for temporary housing. These days were a real turning point for him and Max. No longer tied to a cold park bench, they now had a place where they could feel relatively safe. The small room in the shelter was modest, but for John it was a real paradise. For Max, it was an opportunity to sleep peacefully on a soft rug next to his master's bed. John felt that his life had begun to change for the better. One morning, he decided to take advantage of the support program he had been told about. He made an appointment with a social worker to help him find a job. John had not worked for a long time, but now he was motivated. He wanted to create a stable life for himself and Max. While John was taking care of business, Max was always by his side. The dog seemed to feel that his owner was beginning to regain his faith in himself, and his behavior only encouraged him. They walked around the city together, and now people stopped to greet them more often. Word of the incident in the park spread quickly, and many people recognized John and his dog. One day, when John was returning from a consultation, he received a call. The voice on the other end of the line was unfamiliar but warm. "Hello, is this John?" he was asked. "Yes, it's me," he replied, a little surprised. "My name is Sarah, and I work for a foundation that supports people in difficult life situations. We heard your story, and I'd like to offer you something. Would you like to meet tomorrow?" John agreed, although he didn't know what to expect. The next day, he showed up for the meeting in the foundation's small office. Sarah was a young woman who radiated sincerity and a desire to help. She explained that the foundation was ready to support him and Max by offering a rehabilitation program and help with employment. She also said that one of the local companies was looking for employees for simple work and John could try it. John felt a wave of gratitude. He realized that this was his chance, a chance that the world had given him after all these years of struggle. "I'm ready to try," he said, and Sarah smiled back. Max, as always, was there, a silent witness to all these changes. He lay at John's feet, calmly watching his master find his way to a new life. John felt that everything was possible now. His life was no longer a vicious circle of struggle for survival. He began to dream again. One evening, as he and Max sat on the porch of their temporary home, John looked up at the starry sky and thought. He remembered the moment in the park when Keanu Reeves stood up for them. That moment was the beginning of a chain of changes that turned his life around. John couldn't help but think about how one act of kindness can change someone's life. He realized that he too wanted to help others, just as he had been helped. The next morning he returned to the foundation with a new idea. "I want to become a volunteer," he told Sarah. "I want to help those who are in the same situation as me." Sarah was pleasantly surprised. She explained that there is always a need for people who know from their own experience how to support those who are going through hard times. John started helping out at the foundation, talking to other homeless people, telling them his story and inspiring them to change. Max became an unofficial therapy dog who brought joy to everyone who came to the foundation. John saw his life fill with meaning, and it gave him the strength to move on. These small but important steps were just the beginning of his new journey. And although John did not know what would happen next, he felt that with Max by his side and the support of good people like Sarah and Keanu, they would overcome any difficulties. The day came that John and Max realized how much a simple act of kindness can change lives. It was their first day in their new home. They were no longer confined to the walls of the temporary shelter, but had a small but cozy apartment that John was able to get thanks to the support program. He felt as if he had regained a piece of dignity that he had long lost. Max seemed to realize that this day was special. He ran around the rooms, sniffing every corner, and then returned to John to get an approving look or a caress. John was sitting in an old but comfortable chair, looking at his friend with a smile. Tears shone in his eyes, but this time they were tears of happiness. That day, John decided to write a letter. He did not know if it would reach the addressee, but he really wanted to express his feelings. In the letter, he talked about that day in the park, how Keanu Reeves' intervention changed his life, how the support he received gave him a chance for a new beginning. "I don't know if I'll see you again," he wrote, "but I want you to know that what you did more than you could have ever imagined. You have given me not only support, but faith that humanity exists." John sent the letter to the foundation's address, hoping that it would be passed on, and then he went back to his business. His days were now filled with work, volunteering, and the small joys he found in every moment. Max was always by his side, reminding him how far they had both come. One day when John came home from work, he found a letter in his mailbox. It was from the foundation, but there was a name on the envelope that he immediately recognized. Opening the letter, he saw a simple but warm text. "John, I'm glad to hear that you and Max were able to find a new path. Your letter touched me. Remember that you are an example for many others. Continue to inspire and help as you have been doing. Best wishes, Keanu." John looked at the letter for a long time, feeling incredibly grateful. It was yet another proof of how important it is not to be afraid to make a difference in someone's life. He carefully folded the letter and put it in the box where he kept his most valuable things. John and Max's lives went on. They remained inseparable, and every new day became a gift for them. John often told others his story, reminding them that even in the darkest moments there is always a chance for light. And Max, as always, was there for him, ready to remind his master that true friendship is the most valuable thing in life.
Goodbye.